I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
When Martin Luther King Jr. fought for the civil rights of all Americans, he understood that unchosen attributes like race, ethnicity, and nationality should not divide us. The only race that matters is the human race, and we should all treat each other as individuals, as brothers and sisters united in our humanity. In today's universities, King's dream is considered not only passé, but outright harmful. Critical theory, or more specifically critical race theory, the intellectual framework steadily seeping from academia's ivory towers into the national conversation, demands that we use race as a lens through which to examine every aspect of our society. You've probably heard a lot of talk lately about anti-racism. Books like Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist are quickly toppling the bestseller lists. In it, Ibram Kendi insists that there's no such thing as being not racist. There is only anti-racism and racism. Indeed, simply claiming to not be a racist is a form of denial, the very heartbeat of racism. And this is the problem. The anti-racism label means that all criticism, anything short of unconditional agreement, can be dismissed as hate, bigotry, and ignorance. But in reality, this is just a rhetorical trick, one that disguises the ironic fact that anti-racism itself, at its heart, is deeply and profoundly racist. How can this be? How can someone be against racism and for racism at the same time? As I explained in a previous video, the critical race theorists, the one largely behind the anti-racist movement, have redefined the term racism beyond all recognition of most English speakers. Instead of referring to prejudice and discrimination based on race, the new definition is defined based on collective or group power dynamics. Kendi defines anti-racism as supporting any policy or idea that levels racial disparity and social economic outcome, and racism he defines as a policy or idea that results in racial disparity for any minority group. If you're a member of a dominant group, it doesn't matter what your individual attitudes are. You're guilty of contributing to systemic racism by association. Furthermore, to Kendi, the idea of colorblindness is a racist concept because in his mind, it is impossible to look beyond race, and any attempt to do so can only be a guise for maintaining the racist status quo. Moreover, discrimination itself is not necessarily racist according to Kendi, as long as it is used to create racial equity. Kendi explains it like this: the only remedy to a racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. I'll let that sink in. So by this logic, members of minority groups can never be racist because they lack the power to follow through on their prejudices. They have a false consciousness that has been socialized into them. They have been forced by dominant groups into internalizing their oppression, as the critical theorists say. This is the biggest problem with the anti-racist movement. It doesn't recognize individuals, only groups. It doesn't matter what you as an individual have done or said. The only thing that is important is which group you belong to. In other words, the color of your skin. That seems bad enough on its own, but it doesn't stop there. Baked into certain anti-racist narratives are certain assumptions about people based on their racial identity. For example, if you're black or Hispanic or a woman, critical theory assumes that you have no power. Critical race theory seeks to empower black and other minorities, except Asians, by forcing on them and leveraging a permanent victim status. The entire woke movement is about deferring responsibility from victims of systemic oppression, which is an inherently disabling and limiting way of thinking. Critical theory says that white supremacy has already stripped away all agency, and that taking up a critical victimhood status is regaining that agency. I ask you this: when has giving away agency and personal responsibility ever led to mass advancement? The soft bigotry of low expectations is a phrase used to describe the danger of assuming minorities are somehow less intelligent or less capable. Anti-racism, as is practiced today, actually depends on these assumptions as a fundamental part of its worldview. A black person can never be racist because they lack power and are condemned to a life of victimhood. How insulting is that? A black person can only think for themselves if they are adopting this woke victimhood status. Otherwise, they are acting out of internalized racism, says the critical theorist. Meanwhile, so-called anti-racists are fine with policies that discriminate against Asian Americans trying to get into the best universities, despite the fact that they are a minority immigrant population with little representation in the government. Because they are deemed to have power, based on what metric, it's not really clear, they are deemed acceptable targets of overtly racist policies. The real problem here is collectivism. Once you choose to identify people based on their group membership rather than their individual characteristics, it is inevitable that racism, as well as sexism, nationalism, and every other form of nasty prejudice will follow. The only way out of this trap is to view people as individuals, with their own distinct virtues, vices, and personalities. Dr. King had it right. We must judge each other based on the content of our character. Any other system leads to this kind of hateful tribalism that we're seeing today. Everyone pick a team, put on a uniform, and let the games begin. Only in this game, there are no winners, and the trophy is a loss of a civilized society.